So this is the prologue of the book. It's pretty descriptive, so don't just skim through it. Pay attention to how author paints a picture of Rosetto. And it is so well written that you would want to sort of copy the way this author writes. So let's go back to the story, because Rosetto turns out to be a very unusual place. For decades, doctors were scratching their heads trying to understand why the people there were so healthy. They seemed to avoid many of the health problems that were common everywhere else. And that's really the mystery at the center of this book. Why did Rosetto break all the rules? I mean, Rosetto didn't really fit the pattern. It didn't follow the rules. And that's exactly what doctors and researchers became obsessed with, figuring out what was going on. So when you think about it, Rosetto was a perfect outlier. You know, in science, an outlier is a result that is so different from everything else, like it's out of the norm. Like sometimes it's too good or maybe it's too bad, so it actually hurts the average, the mean. So you kind of think it's just kind of a mistake in the data, but Rosetto, it actually wasn't. It was very real. To really understand this mystery, you have to go to the very beginning of this town. And that beginning is actually not in Pennsylvania. It's about 100 miles southeast of Rome in a little Italian village called Rosetto Balfatore. It all started in 1882 when a small group of people from the Italian village of Rosetto left for America in search of work. They found jobs in Slate Quarry, which is basically a place where rock is mined and cut for building materials. And since they were earning a decent living, they wrote back home to tell their families about this opportunity across the ocean. So before long, a few immigrants turned into hundreds, more and more people arrived, and together they bought land on rocky hillside and began building a new community. And here's the interesting thing. They didn't just move to America. They actually recreated their old village. They built houses that looked exactly like the ones back in Italy. And they used the same street names. They spoke the same dialect. They kept the same traditions. So they even actually named their town Rosetto. So in many ways, it became like a small piece of Italy in the middle of Pennsylvania, a very close-knit community that was surprisingly separate from the towns all around it. And this is where our main investigators come in. A physician named Dr. Stuart Wolf. When he heard about this town with no heart disease, his first reaction was basically, no way, that can't really be true. It just didn't make sense to him. So he put together a team to go find out for sure why. And what they found was pretty incredible. The stories were true. It wasn't just that people in Rosetto had fewer heart attacks. Their overall death rate was about 30 to 35% lower than national average. And the surprises didn't stop there. There were very few cases of suicide, alcoholism, drug addiction. Crime rates were extremely low as well. So even like peptic ulcers, which were very common at that time and often linked to stress, was unusually rare in Rosetto. So the more researchers looked, the more unusual the town seemed. It wasn't just healthier in one area, it just seemed to be very healthy in almost every way. People are just dying from old ages. In a country that was fighting all these modern diseases, the people in Rosetto were just living. They were living long, full lives and dying of old ages, and that was it. So the mystery kind of got deeper. What on earth was protecting them? So Dr. Wolf and his team did what any good scientist would do. They started a process of elimination. They looked at all the unusual suspects, all the typical explanations for why a group of people might be so extra healthy. And one by one, every single theory just kind of completely fell flat. So the first place they look, right, was their diet. I mean, they're Italians. You think maybe they brought over some super healthy old world Mediterranean diet with them. Maybe drink olive oil every morning or lemon juice or something. But nope, not even close. In fact, it was exactly the opposite. Turns out the Rosettans had totally ditched their healthy eating habit. They were cooking with lard instead of olive oil, and 41% of their calories came from fat. They smoked like chimneys, and a lot of them were seriously overweight. So, yeah, it definitely wasn't the diet. So, all right, so scratch diet off the list. Then what's next? Maybe it's genetics. They all came from this one tiny village in Italy. Maybe they just had some kind of superior genes that made them resistant to heart disease. Another dead end. The team was clever and they tracked down relatives of Rosettans who lived in other parts of the US. And guess what? Those relatives with the exact same gene pool had exact same rates of heart disease as everybody else in America. So it wasn't their DNA. So at this point, you got to be thinking, what's left? It's not their habits. It's not their genes. Maybe it's the place itself, something in the water or in the air or the sun in that part of Pennsylvania. And that theory didn't last long either, because Wolf's team looked at two towns right next door, Bangor and Nazareth. And same environment, same water, also full of similar European immigrants. And yet their death rates from heart disease were 3 times higher than that of Roseto. 3 times. So nope, it wasn't the location either. So now the researchers were really scratching their heads. They checked off all the boxes: diet, genetics, location. All of them were completely a dead end. So the puzzle pieces just weren't fitting together. It was then that Wolf realized that he'd been looking at the problem all wrong. He had to stop looking at the Rosettans as individuals and start looking at the world that they had created for themselves. He had to look beyond the individual. And that was it. The magical protective secret of Roseto was Roseto. It wasn't something inside the people. It was the community they had built all around them. I mean, you see, when the researchers actually started observing the town's culture, they saw something amazing. They saw 3 generations of a family all living under the same roof. They saw a town where nobody flaunted their wealth, nobody felt poor or left out. For a town of less than 2,000 people, they had 22 different community groups. People were always out on the street talking, cooking for their neighbors, going to church. Grandparents were treated with incredible respect. It was this kind of incredible, tight, supportive social structure that was the protective factor. So without even realizing it, by creating this Italian village, the Rosettans had built this powerful protective shield around themselves. Their community insulated them from all the stress and pressure of the modern American world. They were healthy because of where they were from, not geographically, but culturally. And this is really where the story of this one tiny town becomes a huge lesson for all of us. Rosetta makes you rethink everything you thought you knew about what it takes to be healthy, and maybe even what it takes to be successful. I mean, it's this quote that just nails it. It's the people who surround us. We spend so much time thinking about our personal choices, what we eat, if we go to the gym, if we take our vitamins. But Rosetta showed us, plain as day, that our environment, our culture, and the people we share our lives with, well, that might be even more important. And that kind of leaves us with one big question to chew on, doesn't it? We're all focused on diet and workout and our personal biology, but what if the single most powerful thing we could do for our health isn't about us at all? And this prologue is kind of a metaphor for the whole entire book. Maybe to be an outlier in success, it might not be the obvious things that we thought we needed. It might be some other factor hidden in our society. If you'd like more personalized feedback, writing support, and discussion sessions, they're available with me or with our selected tutors. All the details are here.